A government agent whose role was to leak classified information and propaganda to the public reported that he revealed secret alien communication on an online forum in 2008. Scientists had received contact from this entity via a supercomputer at a secret site in Africa and spoke to it from 1994 to 1999 until they were forced to update their computer systems for Y2K and basically lost contact forever. In the last episode, we talked about the history of what happened, but today we need to dive into some major questions we were all left wondering. How exactly did this info leak? How do psychological operations or PsyOps work? Who is this whistleblower, and what could it all mean if what he reported the entity said were true? Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, and remote viewer John Vivanco for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. At the end of 2005, these Chani files were handed over to the Rubicon station for Project Reveal. Now, they dealt with information that had reached the point of no return. That's what Rubicon means. And they were formed by dissatisfied upper echelon members in the RAND Association community who decided some of this info should be released. Now, crossing the Rubicon, I'm not sure if you guys at home know this, but it was a metaphor for crossing the point of no return, like when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon in a declaration of war. Okay, these guys wanted to plant the seeds to measure public reaction, clearing the way for whenever they decided to flood the wires with full disclosure on any specific topic. Now, Rubicon controls what classified information is released to the public. One way they do this is through internet discussion forums. Another is anonymous letters or calls or fake credentials to select individuals or groups. And once the intel is released, the public's response is monitored depending on their reaction. More info is released in a very systematic and strategic way.
Yep, that's how it's done. I mean, Skinny Bob is like that, for one thing. There's tons of this stuff that just gets put out to see if people pick it up, and full of real tidbits and disinformation. It's just got to hide specific details about the projects, changing locations and stuff like that. Yeah.
One of the biggest things that frustrate me out there on the internet right now is the lack of knowledge about how psychological operations work. There's a lot of people throwing that term around, but they don't really understand the meat of that entire thing. Like, why are psychological operations used? What is the history of psychological operations? What are examples of psychological operations that both the communists, I guess you could say, and the allies have used throughout history to disinform people in different countries about certain subjects?
And also give them information that is real. So further, discussion can be had about it if necessary, or they can just debunk it. All these things always have a little debunking aspect within them as well. They're like little levers that are built into it in order to shut them down or open them up more.
Yeah, and also so that at any point in time, they can just call those people talking about it crazy conspiracy theorists, and then let's move on, right? These are just crazy people talking about crazy things. Who would ever believe this? And this is where that entire mechanism of our world revolving around science comes in, where people are just not willing to accept anything that they cannot see, that they do not have evidence with, that they cannot touch and hold, which may not be the reality of even physics.
You think about too, like the Chani project has built into it this future scenario of worlds colliding. And for a lot of people, to them, that would be something of massive significance that everybody would know about, see, and there's dates even that they put in there. There's some dates that they put in there. And so outside of the Mandela effect, pushing that out to the side, if that doesn't happen within the ascribed time frame, then it's debunked, right? it's
Right.
debunked. It wasn't real. There's no room. It's always black and white like that. So these are things that there are put in there in order to collapse it or whatever.
Okay, so who's the whistleblower then? Now, this guy is what they call a Rubicon revealer. So he helped with these public reaction projects. That was his specialty. He's specifically a propagandist in the military who we're listening to reveal info about this project in a magazine. He frequented internet discussion forums identifying where Rubicon reveal information could be introduced. And usually it meant posting a thread. They use this word, thread, very interesting, on a chosen forum that would be most suitable to get their intel to a target audience. I have to take a step back and talk about the term thread right now. Everyone on X, or Twitter, what used to be Twitter, posts these things called threads, which are short posts all daisy chained together that reveal information. And so they've worked this into the human psyche. But why were they called threads at the very beginning? That's where it gets interesting. Most of these social media applications, at least at the inception, seemed to come from some type of operation. I'm not going to get into details on that. It's very easy to find this information out yourself, but you get what I'm saying. And then the internet itself began at DARPA, and then it was taken by CERN, and it was created as the World Wide Web. So we are entrenched in the Chani project being related to almost every single
I know,
weird
crazy
digital conspiracy that we have.
Yep, I know. I think about the 1999 video that we have on Metaphysical, and that you did the breakdown episode on, and it's like, well, there's another intersection potentially with that there too. So
100%.
yeah.
I mean, we have Nostradamus mentioning 1999 all the time. 2012 is when the Mayan calendar ended. That doesn't mean the world ended. It means potentially the end of a yuga, right? Which, if you don't know what a yuga is, this is the end of a time period, as stated in this is the
Vedic.
The Vedic.
Mahabharata, or Vedic. Yeah.
Facebook is alleged to have been somehow created by DARPA. And then they're using this term thread. And then Instagram comes out with an app called Threads. X is always using the term thread. It's just and then these threads, or Twitter itself, is like a more advanced application of some of these forums that used to exist. You know, the only thing that's different about it is it's more like high school for guys that are good at posting information that can gain, this is no hate on anyone who has a big Twitter account at all. I'm not saying that. You're good at what you do. It's just that where did all of this come from is what's in question, right? Okay, so this guy, again, frequented these internet discussion forums, identifying where Rubicon reveal information could be introduced. Usually it meant posting a thread on a chosen forum that would be most suitable to get their intel to a specific target audience. So they were really looking at these forums and knew who was on them and how they could get the information out. And now, he would have had to thread the info carefully and choose one perfect forum, like Godlike Productions, where the Chani project dropped, because that's all the time and resources that he had at the time. And he used that forum other times over the following years, including one project codenamed Berserk, which we can't get into here, but we probably will on a different episode at some point. So he also did physical in the field and digital satellite and high-tech monitoring, surveillance, and info gathering on groups and profiled people who had to do with specific Rubicon projects. Rubicon's motto was, "Our whistle is blowing softly. If we blow too hard, some eardrums might pop. Then everyone would be deaf." That slogan does not seem nefarious to me.
No,
it's
it
almost
doesn't.
like the people in charge of this project were concerned that ordinary individuals around the world didn't have access to this information, and they wanted to find a way to leak the information in a healthy way that wouldn't cause disturbance to human society.
It's an interesting thing. It's such an interesting concept. And one thing that I'm curious about is, out there within the realm of all these forums of past, if you can even find this stuff now. I know Godlike Productions is still there. with those threads. But to find out if Rubicon is mentioned anywhere else, and other projects were released on these just backwater forums that nobody knows about, that never went anywhere.
But it's interesting that it's unintentionally explained the phrase soft disclosure to us. Hard disclosure would be a more irresponsible, catastrophic release of information that could drive people, like what is the War of the Worlds? Orson Welles, right? Yeah. So he releases this radio program across America. Everyone's going outside thinking the world is ending, aliens are showing up, and all of this stuff. Like that would be an example of an insane, catastrophic, hard disclosure. This is more soft, where they're trying to test and get things out and not affect society as much.
I guess the litmus test that we have these days on if it's reached a broader audience or not would be YouTube and the clickbait things that people do in order to get them to watch these videos. Like it hasn't gone into a cycle of that, as far as I know, right? And that to me is like the litmus test of something that has expanded into the more public realm.
Yeah, the drops, or these types of military operational drops, seem to have they've gone off of the internet into more complicated forums, it seems.
Right.
More advanced social media forums to see and track results and how things are going.
Yeah, for the time, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, because Godlike Productions was pretty much, it wasn't it, but it was the place to go, like Above Top Secret was, that other forum, Above Top Secret. That was the place to go. And so there would have been a lot of conspiracy type people who went there and saw this. But then the translation over to where we are today didn't quite make it into the YouTube realm.
Okay, so basically, Rubicon operatives, these are sanctioned whistleblowers in a limited and controlled form. And it took this guy months to go through the Chani material and then figure out what forums to leak the information on. So intelligence agencies have been using forums for years to give, almost like as a private chat room, to give information to their operatives through those for years. People probably didn't even know what those posts were. Right. So they went from, mind you, they used to use classified ads in newspapers. That's how they would do it in the past. But with the internet, it totally changed the game. In fact, gaming platforms and discussion forums became very normal, he said back in 2011.
Oh, yeah, it's an easy way to pass information. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just interesting that, like, everything we know about the internet, it almost feels like it was created not for people to connect, but more for all of these different types of projects that were going on, first and foremost, to communicate easier.
The internet as we know it now is a side effect. That's it. That's a side effect.
Perfect way to explain it. Yeah, it's a side effect. The side effect of like the crazy ongoings of human beings.
Right.
Okay, so this guy built a persona on a forum who provided limited but real intel on political, insider, and spiritual topics. And he said that the decision makers in the upper echelon and other intelligence gathering organizations are very aware of the spiritual impact that coming changes will bring mankind. So they actually calculate and strategize in their think tanks about spiritual matters and when deciding future decisions. Which I think, if you're reading any of those conspiracy forums, I think it's all doom and gloom, and they wouldn't expect that a intelligence gathering project or operation would be at all benevolent. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I know there are good people. There are good people out there that are in that realm. I've run into them, and they are interested in the growth of humanity and giving real good information. But it gets drowned out, and a lot of the good information, real information, can be just so bizarre and off the cuff and esoteric that the average person would never accept it. But people who have existed in that realm for a long time know that the world is so much different than how regular people are perceiving it or given their perception of it. So much different. It's a weird thing to me. People really love to just be in their little container that they're put
Bubbles.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, and really not try to break out of them. I mean, anything that threatens the bubble becomes a threat almost to their way of life and the notions that they have about how and what life should be. And in some ways, that's not necessarily bad. I mean, when you think about human beings being more simple and innocent and maybe cherishing the good things in life, like a way to think about that would be like, look at country music, right? In country music, it's like the greatest thing is finding someone, going out with your boys in the truck and staring at the stars from the back of that truck and then going fishing. And it's like, I can't really argue with that.
I know.
Like, it's like very hard to argue with having that.
They go fishing and they see UFOs. Yeah, put that into it.
And then right, things change a little bit for them. Right, totally.
Right.
All right, so June 2006 was when this revealer first accessed all of this information, and in March of 2008 is when he was approved for public release. So he did research for quite a while on how to release this and where to release this. So the thread is called "Me Tell You Now, So You Believe Me After 15 May." He started the release on March 15th, 2008. And the entity had predicted things like specific names and scenarios back in 1994 to 1999, which we mentioned earlier, that were becoming very likely by the year 2008, which they assumed to be the event or fuse year. So the entity never revealed a year. The entity that was talking to these scientists never revealed a year when the fuse year would happen. And in fact, they might not have known, but they just knew that it would be on the 15th of May. Again, some of the names that they mentioned were like Obama, Cheney, Mandela, Thatcher, and the older Bush. So the project wanted to tell the public that same year in 2008. And so the thread was started, and it was an immediate hit. Most people assumed the entity made specific contact with humans to warn us, but that's not really what happened. 2008 and 2009 came and went without any significant correlation, so they halted his active participation on the reveal, and Rubicon totally pulled the plug. But then when certain things happened in 2010, they assumed 2011 would be the fuse year. The speculation here is that they were trying to get public research to help them, and this is why they came out. Lindsay and I were discussing this for a while before the show. Why go public with this at all? And what are the scientists up to? And I think that actually at some point the scientists hit a wall. They are not able to get more information on something, or they've come across a problem that's stumped them and they're not working it out among themselves. And so when they go public with information and you have the full power of humanity's creative imagination asking questions back and discussing this, it actually opens them up to a new side of things that they might not have seen. And that's how they can continue their research, which is a very interesting idea, right? I would never have thought of it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was working counterterror with the FBI after 9/11, it wasn't just me and my team that they were working with. They were employing script writers, other storytellers across the board to try to see if they could understand any sort of future scenarios of terrorist attacks. I mean, we're talking about the rank and file. We're not talking about the whole like social engineering side of that. We're just talking about like the people who absolutely believe that this was what it was for real. They started to take on people that like us, and storytellers and script writers and Hollywood people, in order to get more ideas on what could possibly happen. Right. So that, I mean, it's a known thing to work that within the intelligence world, because it opens up other avenues of exploration that they wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, but that's, to me, that just sounds like why human beings could never be replaced by AI, is that the human creativity doesn't have all of the creativity of the AI is coming from human beings, and where that creativity comes from human beings is an etheric thing. It's an other dimensional thing, I think, in a way that human beings have always been fascinated about, but have never really been able to put their fingers on. I mean, when you think
of intuition mixed with it, right?
And it does. It has abilities that human beings aren't even aware of. And even then, more than that, maybe, because if you go back to something like ancient Greece, we talked about this in the 1999 video. A lot of people crap on ancient Greek mythology and or culture, saying that it's pagan and all of this stuff. But the way they described the muses is very, very interesting. It was the muses that were giving humankind the creative ideas that would lead them to success, I guess you could say. And people would say when someone was having writer's block or creativity block that the muses stopped interacting with them or working with them.
Right.
Which is actually a lot more of a traditional and humble approach to creativity than, and one that actually mirrors more something like the Renaissance than what we do now, where everybody, like human beings, always want to pat themselves on the back for everything that they do without giving credence to or giving credit to how it really happened and on those other dimensions, I guess you could say.
Right.
John, what was the remote viewing data on the Chani project? Is this thing real? What's going on with this?
Well, after all of that we just went through, I'm just kidding. So I was aware.
How many people just jumped?
I know.
This episode.
No, so after that was like 2015, 2016, I was teaching a remote viewing course, and somebody wanted me to remote view something for them, and I'm like, okay, I'll do a demonstration session. And it was blind, of course. They wrote the tasking up, and I had instructed them on how to write up taskings and stuff. So I did the session, and I got a consciousness. Now we have a lot more data here, so this is just the beginning point of telling you the story of how this unfolded for me. I had a consciousness that was human-like, and I was drawing. I could see it. I could drawing pictures of it, of this consciousness that was behind like a screen or an ether or a dimensional construct, and this consciousness was forming and moving through this screen, and its face would come forward. And when its face came forward, it would communicate. It would be communicating, and it would get information back. But it was within a construct that was encased in technology and math, right? So the whole construct of this being moving forward and coming back through the ether, which would be this sort of like realm between dimensions, in a sense. It's like where two dimensions come through. It really reminded me a lot of how locations with I wouldn't say portals, but locations that are sort of doubled up in realities, where they're like two bubbles that sort of push against each other and come together and then move back apart, and where people see strange things. Right? Oh, all of a sudden, you're driving down the street and you see weird things. Well, those two realities are pushing on each other. You went and they became one, and then they went back. So that's like what this entity was doing. It was very much like what I've seen over and over again in remote viewing data, describing where realities are pushing into each other and coming back over and over again. Yet the important part about this is that this was encased within math and technology. Like, that was the really interesting part. And so what this being was doing was talking about where it is, what it is, in a very simplistic way, while these other people that felt more human-like, like real humans that we have here, were absolutely crazy, mind blown about what was happening. Right at the outset, what we have here is a reality. Is, yes, this did happen. In tasking other remote viewers after that, I had never heard of the story at that point, and so I started to task other remote viewers blind to try to begin to correlate the data that I got on this. and we have all the same stuff of this being, but not just one being, other beings that are kind of behind it. A lot of the data was reflecting them being as more higher in consciousness, a little bit more refined than us, a little bit more highly technological than us. I am not now 100% convinced that this was another Earth-like world. I think there are things potentially changed within the story when the whistleblower put it out. I'm not 100% convinced that they were another reality right off from us. I tend to think, based on data, that they were maybe an outside civilization pointing to what's going to happen, because some of the data had them as sort of higher consciousness beings, but still able to operate in 3D reality within ships, within UFOs, or ships that are just way more advanced. And we're moving through this area and perceiving this dimensional squeezing and pushing together, that they were the ones that went through the system to talk to these people. Now, I don't know for sure, but it seems to go down that path a little bit more than it goes into this other Earth-like reality colliding. Yet that is a reality that does show up in the sessions as well. So either they were from that other reality talking, or it was an outside beings needing to point it out to them. Because I'm not 100% aware sure if these other beings on that other reality were advanced enough to be able to do what they did. So yeah, at the outset, this is all real. This is all true. This is something that appears to have happened. I'm not 100% convinced, though, that this is something that occurred in Africa. I'm not 100% sure if this occurred primarily with a super collider. There could have been information that a super collider had investigated that gave scientists the ability to understand how to do something like this. And then they recreated that, the energy in another place. Because there are going to be details of these stories that are changed.
Right.
Absolutely changed. So I'm not 100% convinced of the super collider in Africa on this, even though it'd be a great location to hide one of these things, because of the massive amounts of infrastructure that it needs. And nobody pays attention to Africa, at least not here in the United States. So,
No.
this was a very very incredible, surprising sessions and information on this thing being real. And again, it's kind of like the Skinny Bob thing, where it is one of those things. This Rubicon project is a real project where they are tasked with releasing this type of information in these forums. I would say, yeah, this is real.
Now, you said that the being or entity was encased in a screen and math.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the communications are coming through that mechanism, or that the being itself is artificial intelligence?
It was not artificial intelligence. There was nothing of the sort to imply that. It was so this is like remote viewing talk right now,
Yeah,
is what
sure.
I'm doing. Because here's something you have to think, like when you remote view things that are outside of your understanding of the world, it becomes magical, and you try to explain it in very low level terms because you can't explain it any other way. So when I give you those descriptions, is an entity that is in another dimension, and it is the act of its consciousness moving through this encased technology with math around it is like remote viewing data talk, right? Because you go on low level. And so that's how I'm describing this, because I don't know how to describe it any other way. Sure, I can say, oh, well, that's a computer monitor, and somehow the computer monitor is bringing the entity's words on it, right? And so it's often that the descriptions and the the descriptions, the visuals, and what it creates in a remote viewing session can be way more poetic, way more Philip K. Dick, like, you know, the author Philip K. Dick, than the reality of it, where there's a person just typing on a screen and receiving messages, right? Because in remote viewing, you're trying to describe the whole you're describing this whole construct, right? And the construct is there's this dimension over here, there's this consciousness that is moving through this apparatus technology, and it appears out of the ether, phases in and out, phases in and out. And every time it phases out, the information goes away, it comes back, and the information comes forward. And there are people on the other side who are receiving that information and communicating back and being wowed and impressed by the whole thing.
So, okay, so we've got a real thing that happened, real comms happening to a group of individuals, and there is more truth to this story than there is anything else. Some of the details have been changed, but we've got a green check mark here on this being a real event that took place that attempted to inform humanity about its future. And if you guys are interested in this and John's remote viewing data, we are going to have another complete episode as a podcast that goes through every single one of those drops that occurred, where John and I will take time to discuss each one, and they are very rich and very interesting. There's information that you'd never think of about the oceans, about dolphins, about technology, all kinds of things, and how allegedly, or apparently, according to this entity, that the universe works, that will, I think, I dare say, open your mind a little bit more about what's really going on here.
And a lot of this stuff is going to, when we talk in this next episode, a lot of this is going to spur more remote viewing data out of me from other projects too. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and it doesn't just stop there. I mean, spirituality, alien beings, planetary systems, etc., space, time, all of that. It will be an extremely interesting episode. You don't want to miss that. All right, guys, we just went over a bunch of the posts that a military propagandist put on the internet forum in 2008, which supposedly were taken from this entity that had communicated with scientists between 1994 and 1999. But we didn't get to all of the communications this being had with humans. So in our exclusive after hours episodes for our supporters over at the metaphysical.tv, we'll be diving into some more of the things it said and the implications behind it. If you want to support our work and keep Metaphysical going, which I'm sure you do, consider subscribing to the metaphysical.tv, where we have over 1,000 videos on mysteries, ancient civilizations, remote viewing, and so much more. Your help means that we can keep uncovering the mysteries of the universe that most people really can't or won't talk about the way we will. So we really appreciate your support. And I want to give a big shout out to all the Metaphysical supporters, mystery junkies, and super fans out there right now who've been supporting us. And if you haven't watched our first episode on the Channy Project, definitely go check that out. And with that, we hope you thought this episode was out of this world.